Yeah.
There is no regime. This is just a terrorist, or let's put it in political science term, it's a armed non-state actor. Let's not recall. That's why they're not internally legitimate, and that's why they're not internationally recognized. There's a reason. And look at their behavior. They're not created to govern, and they've not been governing.
But
The
at the as
economies,
the at
the,
the
the
same time,
economies,
these laws.
so the economies collapse. So I'm not worried about these, small conversations about who's in power in Kabul and who's in power in Kandahar. What I'm talking about is the externality. My focus is on external players. If external players stop hedging, then they can bring these hedging Afghans together. Once these hedging Afghans are together, and once there's a conflict resolution process institutionalized through the UN and SCO, where everyone does their part under a compact, where there is conditionality, where there's reciprocity, where there's enforcement. Remember enforcement. Then the Taliban would behave immediately because they will feel the pressure. So far, the Taliban thinks that it can just hedge, and they've learned how to hedge. Hedge against Pakistan, hedge against this, hedge against that. That's why they're dealing with Pakistan one way, they're dealing with Russia in another way. They're milking the United States for tens of millions of dollars yet on another way to maintain this artificial macroeconomic stability in Afghanistan, etc. So what I'm saying is that the external players are the problem that have maintained the Taliban and power towards their selective national security objectives, where those objectives are not aligned in the Afghan context. And that's why then you run into what powers balancing through instruments, often non-state actors like the Taliban. That's why you have the US supporting the Taliban, one way or another, at least engaging with them, China, Russia, Pakistan, and Iran. They're all maintaining pragmatic engagement with the Taliban in what? In balancing acts. And who can do that? Non-state actors. So
Yeah.
probably it's not in the interest of external players to have a legitimate and inclusive government consistent with the United Nations Charter. Maybe that's not helping advance their interest. That's why they're all reluctant and they're more interested in the status quo. So that's why I really take a deep dive into international relations and theories of international relations. Here we're talking about offensive realism and defensive realism and how
Right.
state actors are balancing the two to advance their self-interest, victimizing Afghans and victimizing Afghanistan under international law. That's why the issue of Afghans is very small. Once these players get their acts together, not so much the extra regional players, because they were there and they failed. We also wanted them to fail. I was in Moscow and I told Foreign Minister Lavrov that NATO is now leaving, and also in the presence of deputy foreign ministers of 11 countries, including Pakistan. Now, what's our agenda in the region? What are you going to do in Afghanistan? What is China doing? What's Russia doing? What's Pakistan, Iran, and India? These are the key players. And if you didn't want either directly or indirectly opposing NATO's presence in Afghanistan, now NATO is leaving. What are you, the region, in your own backyard doing? Is the alternative the Taliban, or is the alternative for you to support a principled conflict resolution process where the Taliban would be one of the parties, among others, even then? This was in 2017, right after which the Kabul process was launched, and which President Ghani, to his credit, did his best to bring the region together, telling them in these more or less similar ways that NATO is now leaving. Here we have a choice between us plus the Taliban, those reconcilable, and a space that is shared with sustainable peace, governance, good rule of law, Afghan women participating, building on the gains that we have made with external players
Yeah.
that we were not happy. Now, how can we sustain this in our shared best interest where Afghanistan is a connectivity corridor for all of you, for water, for energy, for trade, for, cultural exchange. This was the message of Afghans. And I think if you look at them, Afghans did project as much agency on this issue as
Mhm.
possible. As much as, it was India, Pakistan always rivaling, pulling Afghans to, either direction, but Afghans were telling both sides. And that's why President Ghani and Karzai made multiple visits to Pakistan. President Karzai went so forth to tell Pakistan that we're conjoined twins, which means your
Yeah.
suffering would be ours, and vice versa. And he went multiple times to India, telling India the same thing. Aside from your issues with Pakistan, it's in your shared best interest for Afghanistan to be stable, where both of you could trade with us, work with us, and through Afghanistan with 50 million plus people of Central Asia with energy, with so many other benefits. So let's not dwell too much on the Taliban. They're a project. The project was created. The project can be undone so far as the region has an agenda that's substantive, that's long term, that is shared, that's when. That's where my concern is on behalf of 40 million Afghans. We do
Yes.
talk for
So let's
Afghans, but not
yeah.
those park clients. And we
Mhm.
also talk for the peoples of the region. The youthful populations of India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, and even Central Asia want exactly what I'm saying: peaceful coexistence, win-win programs
I
of
think now
prosperity
Ambassador,
and
I
peace.
think we're kind
So
of
I
like
speak
drifting
also for the
slowly.
region, not just for Afghanistan.